Hello and good morning, classes Maloney and Pines. We're in the headlong rush to Thanksgiving. That's good, but there's a spike in the coronavirus pandemic, excuse me, and that's not so good. I know there's tension amongst families as to what to do. I'll add to the woe, if tension is woeful. Today is also the anniversary of President Kennedy's assassination. 57 years ago, November the 22nd, 1963. I know Patty and I remember where we were when the announcement came through that the president had been shot. It came to me when we look at the political divide and tensions going on today. We've been through it before, different versions of it. So I mentioned that to, if it's any consolation, that things can get worse. One of the things that we've been through in a happy sort of way is the result of what the Stewardship Committee has been doing for the church. The stewardship season has been, it's called Pathways to Generosity. I guess folks have had this sent to them to their homes. A nice brochure. We've had a lot of tips from this brochure, plus people talking about what the church has meant to them over the past years. And our lesson today from Luke is right on the money on generous giving. The last 3 or 4 Sundays particular have stuck in my mind, and I wanted to bring them back into focus for us if that's appropriate. A sermon that Peter gave some Sundays ago on the Matthew 25 church designation by the Presbyterian Church USA. The session passed a resolution to adhere to the articles that the church leaders have outlined for us. And it was his sermon on Matthew 25, which got us headed down the road that we've been on for several Sundays. You will recall that Matthew is quite different from Luke now. Matthew was thinking of the early church as it existed in and around Jerusalem, and it was mostly at that earliest point a mostly Jewish and sort of a sect of Judaism, and it was a separation, and they were under some pressure. It wasn't a happy situation for those who decided that Jesus was in fact the Messiah. Well, in that context, then Matthew is given Jesus, in a sense, is his farewell address to the disciples, who, as we have come to know, are a little slow to catch on, even after spending however many months they've been with Jesus, following in his footsteps and being right with him each step of the way. They still are not quite sure what to make of it all. Let's look at the setup here from Matthew 25. And the setup, which is not fun to emphasize, is it's like the Last Judgment. Here we've got the king facing everybody, all the adherents facing the king, and some folk, the sheep, are on his right, and then all the others, the goats, are on his left. And I know when I am reading the Bible, my first instinct is to associate myself with the sheep, the good guys. And I think that's natural. But I would like to point out that this Matthew 25 designation as this other side, namely the goat side. But let's remind ourselves sort of how it went. The disciples are asking Jesus after Jesus has said what he would like for them to do, which is to clothe the naked, feed the hungry, visit the sick, and visit somebody who's incarcerated in jail, etc., to go do something. And he put it in such a way that the disciples said, Lord, when was it when you were naked and we offered you clothes? When was it when you were sick we came to visit? When was it when you were in trouble? When did we come to your defense? And in the true spirit that Jesus was handling these disciples, his companions, he says, when you did this to the least of them, you did it to me. In other words, what I've been trying to tell you is, what I hope you will do after I'm gone is to see the people on the margins and go help them. And then Matthew goes on. Let's see, let me get the right place. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me, and so forth. And truly I say to you, as you did it to the least of these my brethren, you did it to me. Then he will say to those on his left hand, depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. This is the dark side. For I was hungry and you gave me no food. I was thirsty and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger and you did not welcome me. Naked and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison and you did not visit me. Then they also will answer, Lord, when did we see thee hungry or thirsty or naked? Then he will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did it not to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And they will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. That's hard. That, thank goodness, was not the point of Peter's entreaty that we should do this, that, and the other as a Matthew 25 church. But there it is. And the question I thought maybe I'd have a little time to bring it out as to what do we do with that? Just as a forewarning, I'm not going to tell us what we do with it. We will look at it, at least bring it out and look at it for what it is, because here it is. It was the left and the right were parallel. So Matthew really, he didn't just do this by accident. This is really intentional. And the question comes up to us lay persons, why? With a God of grace like the one we've come to worship and to know. Well, all right, we'll hold on to that for a while. And then look back at the lesson last Sunday by Heather, which I thought she did a good job on. The letters of little John, I guess she put it, or not this John and not that John. These are letters, again, about love and love in action. It's about congregational squabbles, which anybody who's lived in a church for any length of time is lucky if that church doesn't go through some unrest, some squabbles where you've got one faction pointing fingers at the other, and it's mutual, and it's just too bad. That was the dark side of Heather's lesson, which I think she dealt with just gingerly and just right. Not to focus on the dark side. As they say, accentuate the positive. Well, here we come with the lesson today from Acts. Now, Luke is the author of both Luke and Acts, despite the fact that it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then Acts, that John the Greater, I guess, gets interposed between book 1 and book 2 of what Luke wrote. Well, the good part about Luke for we lay persons is that the question as to why Luke wrote it and to whom he was addressing it is pretty clear. He states it right up front. Let me do that. This comes from Luke, the very first of the chapter. This is why Luke says he's writing this down. This account of Jesus' life here on earth, and then the acts that followed his death and resurrection. Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile a narrative of the things which have been accomplished among us, he's acknowledging he's not the only ones tried to write about this, just as they were delivered to us by those who, from the beginning, were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word. He's speaking of eyewitnesses in the way it appears to me that he was not one. He was an eyewitness of the Acts, particularly because of his supposed and probably accurately that he was a journeyman with Paul on his missionary journeys. And here we get, it seemed good to me also, having followed all things closely for some time past, to write an orderly account for you. Okay, now we're going to find out who he's addressing. For you, most excellent Theophilus, that you may know the truth concerning the things of which you have been informed. All right. Theophilus would suggest that he's addressing people who speak and can read Greek. And that separates his audience from what you might guess would be Matthew's audience. And it is true that Luke was interested in the expansion of the church, and he was certainly influenced by Paul's journeys through out the region away from Jerusalem, mostly amongst Gentiles. So here we are. We're looking at the early church, get a really good look at one particular early church, which I think, in contrast to what I've just said, I think this church probably was a smallish one, the earliest of the early, and in Jerusalem. Now, I can't prove that, but we'd have to have a scholar to look at that. But when we see what the church is like, when we look at the lesson, you'll get the notion that, well, this church would never survive. Let's get at the lesson. I'll give you a synopsis, and you can see why I just said what I did about this church would probably not survive. What it is a commune, the church. Luke, the physician now, So he's careful about what he says, especially as it regards people being sick and especially people dying. He says that this church was set up as a commune. That is to say, people join the church by selling everything they owned, laying it at the foot of Peter or whoever the leader of the church was, for the common good of everybody in the congregation. And he's writing to people who maybe are curious about this kind of setup and want to set the record straight. That yes, this church actually happened. I'm going to give it to you straight up, so that you might be, if you're looking at churches, you want to have some idea of how you fit, basically. All right. So Luke is careful to say that laid out. Okay, so that was the entrance to for the congregation. You just understood that you sold everything you had, and then you joined the church with no ownership of the land that you had before you joined. All right, there's this couple, Ananias and Sapphira. And when you get named in the Bible, you're set apart. Not everybody has a name. And these two people, neither one of them has a speaking part, but yet they have names. That says to me, Luke he's not talking about something just he's making up, that this is real. Well, he writes, Luke describes a situation for this couple who want to join the church, that they sit down together and decide what assets they have, and they decide to deceive the church. That is, that they would sell part of what they own, but keep some back for a rainy day. Boy, can't fault them for that. Well, that's that. So everybody who's reading and listening to Luke knows that. Well, the leader of the church is also in on it. He knows exactly what happened. So he calls Ananias in, the husband of the outfit, and confronts him. And he says, Ananias, is it true that you have not sold everything that you had? And he looks at Peter, and maybe he does have the speaking part. I don't have the words in front of me, but he acknowledges it. And then what happens? He drops dead. Good gracious. That is Ananias' penalty, it looks like, for not having given everything away. And now, to make sure, Luke writes, that we get the point, much like happened in Matthew 25, we've got Sapphira being summoned to the council, as it were. And it says just 3 hours later. So her husband's body hadn't even cooled off by the time she shows up. And she's confronted with this deception. And as soon as it's clear to her that she's been caught, she drops dead. All right. What are we to make of that? Is this Luke trying to give us some sort of parable as to how we should act? Now, if you read this brochure from our church, Pathways of Generosity, this Sunday is when we sign on the dotted line. I don't think anybody expects us to give everything we have. What's happened? Well, the commentaries I've read, the best one I read is Eugene March, who actually wrote our lesson. He points out that look, a commune is not a communistic in the sense that pure communism, because the state owns everything, there's no ownership. So I'm sorry, I think the other commentary I read, I only read two. Eugene didn't say that. He had some other soothing things to say about the dropping dead. But Al Wynn is Albert Curry Wynn is the author of the Layman's Bible commentary. I'd always heard about Al Wynn. He is a Davidson graduate and has two or three seminary doctoral degrees, and actually taught Bible at Davidson College and went on to teach at Spelman College. That says something about Al Wynn positively. He was also moderator of the Presbyterian Church USA. So most Davidsonians have heard of Al Wynn. Anyway, he was the one who pointed out that, and this was 1960s when he points it out, said, look, that wasn't communism. That a commune of this nature in Acts was that you did have property, but you decided to give it up. In a communistic society, you were born and the state owns everything. You don't own anything in the pure form of it. Okay, well, what do we do about this dropping dead? I'm not trying to, the focus should be on deceit, deceiving yourself. And I think maybe I ought to, at this point, give a confession. This is my time now to confess. I had a little bit of that in me even after I started preparing for this lesson. Patty and I were in the grocery store to get the items for one of the food sandwich outreaches that we have at our church for roof at the top. I think it was 70 sandwiches and so forth. We participated in that. Okay, I know Food Line only parts that interest me, and one of them is the bread aisle. So I'm pushing the cart, and here's Patty with the list in her hand. She's putting stuff into the cart to make these sandwiches. Well, my initial thought, this is what I'm confessing, and I ask your forgiveness and forgiveness from above. I thought, well, she's going to get the glue bread, the less nutritious, because it's cheaper. Get the Food Line brand, it's just cheaper. And then it dawned on me when her hand didn't go in that direction, that I was the bad guy in Luke's. Now, I didn't expect to be struck down dead for having that thought. But as I say, I generally, when I'm lazily reading the Bible, it's so easy for me to overlook the finger being pointed right at me. So there's my confession. Well, to wrap this up, I'd like to point out I guess I'd call it a rationalization. How in the world do we read things like this with the Matthew 25 eternal damnation, and for the Acts chapter 4, whatever we have here, where your punishment is that you're just not going to live any longer if you try to deceive God and everybody else, that you're really not giving. You're giving expendable stuff that could just well go to the trash heap. In other words, you're not thinking about the recipients of people who benefit from this. Well, there's one phrase in Psalm 139 which I have focused on. It's Psalm 39, I think it's verse 6. And I'll get to that the verse that I really focus on. But what Psalm 139, we ought to finish on it because it's the happiest hymn of praise you could possibly imagine. Lord, that has searched me, known me, thou knowest when I sit down and when I rise up, thou discernest my thoughts from afar. This creator of the universe, of black holes, of quantum mechanics, of what makes cell division work, how the coronavirus actually works and how it can be combated. This God, the God who knows everything yet, this praiser, he says, such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. That's my one of the highlighted verses for me in the Bible. It helps me with trusting that the God we worship, the God we see in Jesus Christ, actually can care for us. It is, I can hear this man saying, I guess it's a man, the writer of Psalm 139, saying it's unbelievable. Rationally, you cannot believe that. This is where logic doesn't do the job. So this guy is just raising his hands towards heaven and exulting in the fact that somehow he has received the gift of trust that this God actually knows me, has searched me and known me, and thou knowest when I sit down and when I rise up. It's too bad because the God knows me well enough to know me in that bread aisle is not happy with it. So let's end with that as the happy note of all of this. How do we treat the dark side of, what about a person who is convinced that if you don't do so-and-so, don't believe so-and-so, and don't state so-and-so, that you're going to the hot spot. You're going to be eternally damned. And that hell, fire, and brimstone kind of preaching has sort of gone out of style, although I learned this morning, that it's not completely gone, that there are churches that actually preach this. And it's just, so what I think is what we should do is say, okay, let's point the finger at us first. Number one, I do not know the mind of God. I don't. I trust in a God where hellfire and brimstone and so forth is not going to be a punishment for anybody. But there are those who see God in a different way, and because the mind of God is too high, I cannot attain it, I have to leave the possibility open that that person is just as sincere as I am. And insofar as that person's actions are detrimental to somebody, that's where we don't meet. But it at least is an invitation to us as Reformed theology Presbyterians to look for bridges to people who differ from us. It can't hurt. It doesn't mean we agree with how those actions play out in the context of a church, but at least it opens the door for us, or keeps us from being asserting the moral high ground. And I guess that's the best thing that can be said about that. We don't know, they don't know. Let's look for some way not to compromise, but to build bridges. So have a good day and have a good coming week. Goodbye.